Thank you. H.R. 2584 is without question and without precedent the most regressive, destructive, and shameless attack on our environmental protections, this country's public health, and conservation in over 4 decades. This is accomplished through the backdoor changes that 40 ideologically driven policy writers in the legislation, and is easily the biggest payout to polluters and special interests who helped craft these riders and who are now adding those to our laws. And this also accomplished on the riders on an appropriation bill that legislate. It's also accomplished through defunding agencies such as the EPA so that their oversight is weakened and their enforcement becomes non-existent. Giveaway in public lands. These mechanisms are used in this legislation to not only undermine, but to dismantle protections that have been part of the legacy of this nation for years upon years and decade upon decade. Matters of life and death to the American people, clean air and clean water, are left without funding to protect American families. And the legislation before us does not create jobs. If the reason of the deficit reduction, the reason that this is being done, as we hear from the other side, is for deficit reduction, that sounds hollow and contrived when one measures the cost of public health and cleanup that awaits the taxpayer in the very near future. It sounds hollow when the taxpayer sees the tax breaks, the public resource giveaways, and unregulated privileges to industry and big business. It seems hollow when the average American taxpayer suffers both the financial and human cost of this legislation. Let me use one example of a rider introduced by my colleague from Arizona, a son of Arizona, to the Grand Canyon. This would effectively defund any opportunity to study, to analyze the consequences of uranium mining on 1 million acres around the Grand Canyon. If anything else were to be an important point for this Congress, it is the icon of all our national parks, the Grand Canyon. And the uranium mining in that area has caused damage to people and the environment for years upon years. And now, with this rider, we are perpetuating the same climate, the same strategy that has caused the problems in the area. We are jeopardizing the water, the Colorado River, and water users in Nevada, California, and Arizona. And they use an expert. They tout an expert. As of today and recently, a person who rationalized that there will be no real damage to the Grand Canyon. Isn't it ironic and somewhat interesting to note that this expert is sitting on 30 or more mining claims in the withdrawal area around the Grand Canyon and would stand to do very, very well financially upon sale and resale of these claims. This is the expert. This legislation, 2584, is a feeding frenzy for polluters, big oil and speculators who make their huge profits by cutting corners, ignoring regulations, and skirting the responsibilities we all have to follow the law. Now their mission has an eager partner, the majority of the House of Representatives. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this legislation and to protect the health of the American people and the health of our legacy as a nation. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose, gentleman from Ohio, rise?